Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. My name is Sergey and I'm the owner of NinaVova Custom Jewelry. I'm really happy to be back on this channel. I haven't done any videos for the past almost 3 months, and there was a good reason for that. Although we based in Los Angeles and we design our jewelry and sell it primarily here in California, our production is in Ukraine, in Kyiv. And 3 months ago, the war has started. So we had to prioritize our effort and everything on making the rings on time and relocating our production into the other place and making sure our stones and most importantly, your stones and the gold is in a safe place, then coming back and things like that. So that was quite a lot of work. And also reorganizing all of the logistics and everything that took quite a while, and I personally didn't have enough energy to script and record the YouTube videos. But now I'm back over here and I want to keep with the previous schedule when I was releasing the videos every Friday. And hopefully I'll do that. So I made a challenge on myself to make this big videos explaining everything about engagement ring styles, and I thought it would be nice video because there's quite a lot of confusions about it, and also that's the thing that I'm explaining to a lot of my customers who are contacting to us, and actually through the YouTube as well. So this things seems to be working, and I'm very glad to invest more and more time. But anyway, let's get to the topic of the video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about engagement ring styles, and I'll show you the difference between the types, the styles, and the settings, so you're not going to be confused. And why you actually want to know that, you want to accumulate as much knowledge as possible in order to make the best choice possible, and you want to make sure that you know the differences between the types of the engagement rings, you know the difference between the styles and the settings, and you also want to make sure that you know specifics about each and every style and the setting, so you would make a right choice and you're not going to make like very common mistakes. So if any of these things doesn't look familiar to you, then you want to watch this video until the very end, and also until at the end I'll show you what things better to combine with what, if you know what I mean. So anyway, let's get started. Let's get started with the types. And when we're talking about the types, we're talking about the general look of the engagement ring. We're not talking about styles, engravings, and how the stone is set. We're talking about how the engagement ring looks in general. So first of all, there is a solitaire type of the engagement ring. That's when you have the single stone on the top of your ring. That's really about it. That's as simple as it gets, and many people buy them because of this simplicity. And throughout the video, I'm going to have the photos somewhere here that shows the actual styles and the settings. But when we're talking about the solitaire, we probably, the first thing that comes to our mind, that's the Tiffany style engagement ring, the Tiffany setting. That's as classic as it can get. But if you're looking at something more, I would say special, a little bit more complicated, then you probably would be looking at the 3-stone engagement ring. In a 3-stone, as the name suggested, you're going to have your main stone over here, and you're going to have a couple of stones on the side, like right over here and right over here, let's say. You can have 5-stone setting as well, 5-stone type of engagement ring. Then in this case, you're going to have 2 more stones right over here on the sides, and probably these stones would be a little bit smaller than this one. And you might have 7-stone type as well. Then you add in 2 more stones over here. Very rarely I actually see the 7-stone setting, and more than that I haven't seen anything, to be honest. Next is the halo setting, the very common setting, and that's the one where we're going to start sharing secrets with you over here. What do you want to know about halo setting in order to pick it right? Well, there is two very important things, and you really have to be aware of that. First of all, you want to make sure that you buy this ring from someone who is making custom engagement ring or who specialize on this halo setting itself. So as I said, there's two things that you need to be aware when you're choosing the halo engagement ring. First is the stones. You want to make sure that your side stones and that your center stone are matching in color and clarity. And why it's not always the case. Sometimes in the big chain stores, you buying, not sometimes, pretty much all the time, you buying the pre-made engagement ring. What does it mean? That your setting is already made, it's out there, it's existing, it's just going to be adjusted to your size. But the center stone is just not there. And after you choose the center stone, they will set it and sell it to you. And usually in these cases, what's happening is that all of the side stones are perfectly white diamonds. They are in D colors just because there is not much difference between the D color and, let's say, the H color when we're talking about the small stones. So this stones, let's put it right over here in D color. And when you choose in the center stone, of course, you're trying to save a little bit of money to make your stone a little bit bigger. So in this case, you might try to sacrifice on color and choose, let's say, H color or something like that. And your salesperson might not know the fact that your center stone has to match the side stones, for example. And the jeweler who is actually making this ring, they probably would not care as well because they just receiving the order that they need to complete, and that's about it. That's not their goal of explaining things. So you're gonna have, let's say, H color right over here. So what's happening is that by itself, you're probably not going to see that it's actually H color. You need to have some sort of reference next to this stone, and guess what? You're going to have this reference with this stones over here. So very clear D color diamonds right over here would be next to the slightly yellowish stone over here. And this D color stones would be highlighting this yellowness of that stone. You don't want to have this kind of look for sure. It's not going to be nice or pleasant or anything. And especially if you have the white gold setting, it's just not going to look good. It's going to look like pretty cheap, I would say. But at the same time, if you chose to go with the H color center stone diamond, you can go ahead and choose H color side stones. And in this case, they're just going to be matching. They're going to implement each other. And there is nothing wrong with that, really. And the second thing, you want to make sure that the actual halo effect is there. Again, this problem happened coming from pre-made engagement rings. And in this case, your setting, as I said, already made. And then you choose in this stone and they set this stone into this setting. And what's happening sometimes is that you might have what it seems like a perfect round diamond, but in reality could be, since it's a natural stone and as a natural stone it's not perfectly round, sometimes you can have, let's say, like 3.2 mil right over here, the radius of the stone 3.2, And right over here, you can have, let's say, like 2.9 or something like that. And you would never see this difference unless you put in this in a halo setting. So what you're going to have natural over here, you're going to have like a slight gap right over here. It's pretty common. I'll put the picture right over here. There's tons of them. So you're going to have the gap right over here. Also, you might have the gap when you're looking at the stone, not from the top, but from the side as well. So it might be not set up correctly into the setting. This is very labor-intense process of making the halo setting properly. It's a custom process, really. So the jeweler have to pick up the stone correctly, the center stone. Then then the jeweler has to make sure that the sign stone picked correctly according to the color of the center stone. And then when he's making the setting, he has to make sure that the setting made specifically for this diamond, for this height of the diamond, for this measurement of the diamond itself. But of course, when we're talking about the pre-made engagement ring, that's not the case. You actually might not see that problems when you're receiving your pre-made engagement ring until you will see properly made halo engagement ring, and after that it's hard to unseen these differences. I'll probably make a separate video on that topic because it's a very important thing, and I really want to make sure that my clients they see the difference between the pre-made halo engagement ring, the mass market one, and the custom-made one. Next one, we have the hidden halo type of engagement ring. And this one is for someone who really wants to have the halo engagement ring, but they not really up to like too flashy things, to big engagement ring or something like that. And they also want to see the halo by themselves. They don't necessarily want everyone to see that. So in this case, the halo would be right under the center stone, as you can see on the photos right now. And from the top, this ring would look like a solitaire engagement ring, but the owner would know that the halo is there and that they can personally see that, or some person close to you can actually see that, and that will know it's there. So it's a hidden treasure for the owner. I would just put it that way. The next one is the pavé type of the, I might pronounce it wrong though, pavé type of the engagement ring. So in this case, your side stone goes around the shank of the engagement ring. There's a different types of the pavé settings, pavé types of the engagement rings. You might have 1/2 of that on your engagement ring, and that usually means that you have fewer side stones on your shank. And shank, by the way, that's the round type of the engagement ring. You might have 3/4 of the pavé, which means that your entire ring, the visible part of the ring, would be covered with the stones. But the bottom part that is right over here would be blank. And that's actually a very good way of doing that, because naturally when you're grabbing things, your stone will be hit by that. So unless you're not touching anything and someone opening the doors for you and stuff like that, I would go with a 3/4 pavé setting over here. The next one is the split shank engagement ring. And in this case, you most likely going to have the tension setting. So what does it mean is that your shank of the ring, and again, that's the round part of the engagement ring, your shank is not connected, and your center stone holds by the tension of your metal. Over here, you want to make sure that you have enough metal to hold your engagement ring, and that you also have set it properly so the stone is not moving. This type of the engagement ring is very tricky, and sometimes when you're hitting this ring against something, your center stone might get loose, and after it gets loose, it will free itself basically, because usually the gemstone's much stronger and much more durable than the gold itself, and it will free itself, and someday you might lose it. So if you go for the split shank type of the engagement ring, you want to make sure that you have more than enough metal to hold this center stone together. So this ring's usually much heavier. So let's say if your typical engagement ring is about like 2 grams or so, like 1.5, then if you go in for the split shank, it's probably going to be like 4-gram engagement ring. Less than that, you're risking losing your center stone. But there's many ways to avoid that, and if you're looking for this type of the engagement ring, contact us and I'll show you how it can be done. So it looks like a split shank engagement ring, but it's actually not quite. The next one is the cluster type of the engagement ring. This one was very, very popular during the 20s and 30s during the Depression, and obviously why it happened is because people could not afford the big center stone. So what you can do, you can put like a bunch of small ones together, and it will look beautiful. And there is tons of examples actually when it does look absolutely beautiful, and it also depends on the type of the setting you have and on the style and things like that. But the cluster, again, that's when you have the cluster of few different stones. It might be 7, 8, 10 different stones, put it together. And this might look beautiful, might not look beautiful. It all depends on the design and the type of the setting you have. So we covered most of the types of the engagement rings, and let's move to the styles. I listed the most common styles over here. Of course, there is many more, but we're going to be talking about the most common one. And we'll start with the modern. And as always, of course, I'm going to list a couple of different photos so you can actually see what it's looked like. But modern style engagement ring, as the modern architecture or the modern sculptures, would be pretty minimalistic. So there is going to be no engraving or additional lines or anything like that. It would be as simple as possible, really. And it's for someone who looking for a very minimalistic engagement ring, not necessarily minimalistic in terms of it would have like a one stone or anything like that. This ring still can have like a multiple stones or the halo settings or anything like that. But this design of the ring itself would be relatively simple, and all of the attention would go to the main idea or to the stones themselves. The next one is the vintage style engagement ring, and I want you to make sure that you can clearly see the difference between the vintage engagement ring and antique engagement ring. The antique engagement ring, it's the rings that were made 100, 200 years, 300 years ago, and someone made it for someone, and it made its way to the antique shop. It was cleaned. Sometimes it was restored, and if it was restored, that means that the stones could be changed or anything like that. But anyway, you got the difference. That's the old engagement ring that brought to the form and shape that that can be sold, basically. So it was restored. And the vintage engagement ring, That's the ring that made according to certain style. And I list them right over here. There is also a Victorian style actually as well. So let's talk a little bit about all of them. And again, I'll make a separate video as always. Like when I'm starting making like this big videos, there is the topics that has to be explained separately. So I'll make a separate video on different styles, on the different vintage styles of the engagement ring. But as always, like when I'm starting making like this big videos, there is the topics that has to be explained separately. So I'll make a separate video on different styles, on the different vintage styles of the engagement ring, but let's talk briefly about them right now. So Art Deco. In the simple terms, if you're looking at the Empire State Building, that's the Art Deco, basically. It's the period in like 1920s, 1930s. Streamlines, thoughts about the future and things like that. I'll list a bunch of photos right over here so we can see the difference. It's my personal favorite style out of all, and especially if you do your ring, if you design it like properly and according to this certain style. So let's say if you would go with 3-stone type of the engagement ring with the Art Deco style, and then you would do your basil setting in white gold or the platinum, that's the best. Edwardian in Georgian styles might look similar at the very beginning, and you'll have to study them a little bit more to see the difference. But about both of them, I just want to say that you're going to have lots of additional lines, lots of engravings, lots of hidden meaning and everything like that. It's a very complex engagement rings. You might find Edwardian rings as the antique pieces, so that should be possible, although they would be a little bit more expensive than the brand new engagement ring. With the Georgian, from my experience, it's like an impossible, almost impossible thing. Like a true Georgian antique piece would go for $40,000-$50,000, and that would be a start. Going to the next style, that's the nature-inspired engagement ring. And as the name suggests, this design's inspired by nature. Doesn't matter which part of it. For example, we did absolutely incredible sapphire engagement ring that inspired by the forest. So the chunk of the ring is look like a branch, and the lifts holding the center stone itself, and the lift has all of the details as the natural lift would have. So it's really a beautiful piece, and we made it with the rose gold as well. So just an incredible piece. I'm very proud of it, really. So and now when we covered the types of the engagement ring and the styles, it's time to talk about technical aspects of the engagement ring, and we're going to be talking about the setting itself. So just to make it visual, let's say it's your center stone, and this is the list of the most common settings over here, and we will start with the prongs. Prongs, that's little pieces of metals that hold your center stone. You can, first of all, you can have the different types of the prongs. You can have the simple round prongs like that. That's the most common way of holding your stone. You can have the claw prongs that looks like an arrow right over here. It can be a long one. It can be what it's called petite claw prong, like a little bit shorter version of this. Also, you can have the square prongs right over here. You can have pretty much everything you want. You can also combine different types of the prongs in one setting. So let's say you have pearl stone. I'm not the best drawer over here, but you're probably getting what I'm trying to show over here. So let's say you have very sharp edge right over here, and what you do want to have over here, you want to have the triangle prong over here, and on the sides you can have the little round prongs. Or let's say you have marquee type of the stone, right? So in this case, you definitely want to cover the tips of your marquee with a triangle prong over here and here, and the side of the stone you can hold with very barely visible round prongs. And again, it depends on your style. You can put the claw prongs over here. I've seen many engagement rings where pearl shape or marquee shape does not protect with triangle prongs. I would never recommend that. First of all, you can injure yourself with this sharp edge. The other thing, you can just easily break the tip of your stone, or you can do two things at the same time. So I would highly recommend to protect the tip of your stone if you have like a sharp edges right over here. Again, it's a good topic for the separate video to explain absolutely everything about the setting, but our goal in this video is to briefly go through all of them. The next type of the setting is the bezel setting. I would say it's my favorite type of setting, just because I like the Art Deco. In an Art Deco, you often would see the bezel setting. That's the most secure way of setting your stone as well. The only downside would be is that when you do the bezel setting, you cover in lots of your stone with it, and it might be not a best solution for a smaller stone. So let's say if you have half a carat, I would not recommend to do the bezel one. Or let's say even if you have like a bigger stone, like a 1 carat stone, but you want to make it as large as possible, probably the bezel setting would not be for you as well. Bezel is for someone who wants to make sure that your prongs, it's kind of not visible, because the bezel setting usually looks like just a part of the ring that just hugging the girdle of the stone. Girdle, it's the, so let's say you're looking at the stone from the side. I'm telling you, and I'm not the best drawer. So let's say that's your setting, that's your stone from the side, right? So the widest part of the stone called girdle, and when you have the bezel setting, your metal get connected just right over here in that part. Yeah. But anyway, or sometimes actually, and that was our case when we did diamond engagement ring with emerald. So we found a very good emerald, but it had a very little inclusion on the side of the stone, and we immediately knew that it would be a perfect candidate for our specific project, because we did the bezel setting and the metal itself covered this inclusion. So it's, when it's set, it's absolutely not visible, and we saved some money that way on the stone. Also, you can go with the half of the bezel setting. That's basically mean that your center stone get hold with on the left, on the right side, let's say, but the top and the bottom is completely free. And with the bezel setting, you can actually do that because it's just enough metal to hold your stone safely. The next one would be channel setting, and as the name might suggest, you're going to have some sort of channel in usually in the shank of the ring, where you place in all of your stones together, and there is no separate prongs that hold in this stone. So the prongs, stones hold primarily by the tension of the channel and by the tension of the stones themselves. It's a pretty complicated setting to do. And again, as previously, if you really want to get this setting, I would highly recommend to do the custom engagement ring, because all of the stones have to be chose for that specific task. So anyway, not going into the details, it's a pretty complicated setting and it has to be made properly. Next one would be the tension setting. We've talked about it briefly right over here when we were talking about split shank type of the engagement ring. So in the tension setting, as the name again suggested, your stone would be held by the tension of the actual shank. And over here, you need to calculate precisely how much metal you need to have to hold this specific stone. And still, I would recommend to ensure this engagement ring just in case you will hit it against something and you would not notice that your center stone got loose or anything like that. But if done properly, if done right, the tension setting would hold the stone pretty much forever. Again, if done right. Doesn't want to say anything bad about mass production engagement rings, but do not do that with the chain stores. Like, do not go for this setting if you buy your ring from the main retailers. Anyway, going to the basket setting. That's your prong setting, but made in a basket shape. So that basically means that your prongs going from the one place, if you're looking at your ring from the side, and your prongs just holding your stone right over here. Not a very complicated setting by itself, but again, you might have an issue if the setting not done properly. So what's going to happen, and I'm pretty sure I can easily find those photos. This part of the engagement ring might break, and you would lose your gallery with the stone itself. So what do you want to make sure that your alloy done properly right over here. And that's another advantage of the custom engagement rings, that one jeweler making absolutely everything, and the jewelers don't want the ring coming back to them because this thing were broken. So it might be a very costly mistake actually over here. In the cathedral setting, that's very similar to the basket setting, but in cathedral setting, your shank just going towards your gallery right over here, providing an additional security for your engagement ring. So actually, if you're going with the main retailer, the chain stores, then the cathedral setting would be relatively safe because you have the connection points right over here, and you also have the additional connection points right over here. So I would say that would be the safest. So now when we've talked about different types of the engagement rings and different styles and different settings, let's talk about different combination of all of these things. What would look good, what not going to look good, and things like that. And before I even start with all of these things, I want to say that the best way to figure out what would look better is actually to get the designer for your engagement ring. And in our case, the designer is included in the overall process of the engagement ring, so you're not paying anything additionally. And this specific designer would work just with you to create everything you want. and you're not limited in anything pretty much. We can cut the stones, we can do any types of design and setting and everything like that. So what I would do, I would completely trust the designer, but before you do that, you want to know everything to talk with the designer on the same language. Like, you want to make sure that you saying to the designer, like, hey, I completely trust you, but here's what I want. I'm looking like more towards the halo. I really like the, let's say, like Edwardian era, but at the same time, I understand that that halo in the Edwardian might be a little bit too much, but can you do something a little bit more simple, but not as simple as the modern style, maybe like a little bit more complicated and things like that. So you have to throw the ideas out there, and somewhere between the lines, the designer would understand you and make sketches for you. And when you're looking at the sketches, then you can give a feedback, and probably after like a couple of iterations, you would find your best design out of all. But if you're trying to solve this puzzle on your own, I want to give you a couple of recommendations. So if you're going with a solitaire type of the engagement ring, you're probably gonna be good with any style over here. You definitely, I mean, the solitaire originally probably made for the modern style, something like that. Vintage styles would work pretty good, especially the Art Deco one. I would not really recommend to go for the Edwardian or Georgian because they are a little bit more complex, and you probably want to implement something different for this styles. Natural and unique, that's again depending on your idea. What do you want to do actually for the natural? Like, where is your inspiration coming from? For the solitaire, again, you can do prongs, and you can do prongs for pretty much any type of the engagement ring in any style, maybe except for the Art Deco. I wouldn't recommend to do prongs for the Art Deco, me personally, but again, it's your engagement ring, so you can do anything you want. Over here, and quite regularly actually, we're using 3-stone engagement rings in the natural inspired style as well. And over here, depending on what are you inspired of, we can do different types of setting as well. For the halo, I would probably recommend to avoid Edwardian and Georgian era, just because the halo and the hidden halo as well, they are pretty complex by itself. I wouldn't say I would recommend to avoid it, but I would try to make sure that you're not overloading the design by itself, because you can just put all of the things together and the ring would look like too much, if it makes sense. So I would try to avoid this type of things. Also for the halo, probably I would avoid the bezel setting, just because it's just look slightly out of hand or so. For the rest of the things, it would be depends on your specific stone and in your specific style of the ring. Split shank. Split shank is quite tricky, and depends how it's made. It could look good or not good in the different types of styles. I personally have seen split shanks made in Edwardian style, which kind of odd, but at the same time, the way it was designed, it looked absolutely beautiful. But most of the times with the split shank, I would go with the modern design or with the Art Deco. And of course, with the split shank, you can do, I'm not talking about separately about unique and custom rings, because they are unique and custom. They not belong to any types of style, and you can do absolutely everything in that field over here. And for the cluster type of the engagement ring, that's where I would go with the Edwardian or Georgian vintage rings. Modern, maybe, if we're talking about emerald shapes, or we're talking about baguette stones, something like that, it would be quite a complicated engagement ring. You're probably not going to save money, but it's not going to be about saving over here. It's all going to be about the style itself. I'm pretty sure most of the jewelers would try to avoid this orders because it's pretty complicated. But cluster might look like incredibly well over here. I'd also, if you're looking at the cluster type of the engagement ring, I would take a look at the antique pieces as well, but make sure that you have the proper guidance when you're choosing this stone. It's a very tricky situation. It's very hard to evaluate this type of engagement rings, and especially because they don't have any certificates. Usually they don't have any certificates, and you want to make sure that you're paying for what is listed, and not many jewelers or not many stores will allow you to take out of the stone in order to appraise the stone, because the stone can be appraised only by itself, not in a setting. And on that note of complication of explaining that this processes can be complicated, I want to end the video and say that although now you know all the different types and styles and settings, it's a very good idea to have professional guidance throughout the process, and that's what we're known for. So please contact us if you're looking for the engagement ring. Send me all of your ideas and desires. What do you want to implement in the engagement rings? What symbols you want to put together? And I and my designers would guide you through the whole process, and you'll see that really our possibilities is endless. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I know it wasn't like very smooth video just because I haven't done them for a while, but the next one is always gonna be better. So I hope I'll see you next Friday. I'll do my best to make sure of that. Again, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to our channel. And if you're looking for the engagement ring, contact us.